Okay, well, why don't we get going this evening? This open house is being recorded as a Zoom meeting online. We're doing it this way to be in compliance and recognize the need for social distancing as we're all trying to stay safe and healthy during the COVID-19 pandemic. Otherwise, we would be holding a physical open house. We would probably have organized this with folks at the Tigard Senior Center and invited people to come join us and meet face to face and talk face to face at the Tigard Senior Center. But I think this is the next best thing. We have worked in different ways to try to continue our community engagement and gather input and host events, us as well as the city of Tigard, and I think everyone else across the country and across this planet, trying to maintain as best as we can, continuing to move things forward as best we can. I hope that all of you joining us this evening, I hope that you are healthy and safe. Same for your families and your friends. First and foremost, our heart goes out to people who are suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic. Also for people who are suffering in general. We know that lower income people, and in particular, Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color are disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as poverty, experiencing poverty in our state and in our country. And so we just want to recognize and hold a space for all of those folks who are suffering disproportionately under today's conditions. That's kind of the framing for moving forward this project that is intended to serve seniors and seniors with limited incomes. I think we'll go ahead to the next slide. So the purpose of our open house is 3 points here. We intend that this is part of our ongoing engagement with the community about the project, and we'll speak to the timeline about that later on in the presentation here. We want to inform, let the public know and let seniors know about this upcoming opportunity for affordable housing. If you are aware of people who need affordable housing, if you're a senior and you're looking for an affordable housing opportunity, we want to make sure you're aware of this, this forthcoming project. And then thirdly, we just want to offer the stakeholders an update as to where we are in the project and how to stay engaged. We have a couple of icebreaker questions just to warm ourselves up a little bit here. And I think that you will, our director, our producer here of this event will forward out a poll. And the first question for you to answer is, should pumpkin spice lattes be available year round? And let's just, each of us take an opportunity to respond to the poll here. This is intended to be a little light and fun and just to get a sense of who's joining us tonight. And I think, is it Julia or Deb, one of you behind the scenes is managing the poll here. When you get enough responses, you'll share the results with us. I personally prefer the cookies from Trader Joe's, the pumpkin flavored cookies with the frosting on them. All right, do we have our poll results to share? Okay, if at the bottom of your screen, if you're chiming in, you see a button that says polls, and I just pulled it up and we have yes, love it, 33%. No, I appreciate it more in the fall, 33%. And they should never be available, another 33%. So we are a kind of in lockstep with each other, and that we're a very balanced group here together this evening. All right, thank you. All right, second question, help us get us focused on our purpose of our agenda and our meeting here this evening, the open house. Do you know a senior personally, yourself, who needs affordable housing? Here's our poll again. And then when we get our results, they will be again posted here. All right. So we have 67% of our 17 participants who say yes, you know of a senior personally who needs affordable housing, and another 33% who don't. But it's the very purpose, thank you, Julia, Deb, for that. It's the very purpose of why we're here and to talk about this important project. Many of us know neighbors, friends, family members, seniors who are on limited incomes and are in need of stable, secure, affordable housing. Next slide, please. So our panelists this evening are myself. I am Trell Anderson. I am the Executive Director at Northwest Housing Alternatives. We will have Sean Farley, who is the Redevelopment Project Manager for the City of Tigard, and he is the primary staff person for the city on this project. We'll hear from Destin Verdun, who is our Director of Real Estate Development at Northwest Housing Alternatives. Then Julia Doty, who is our Director of Programs, and Josh Carrillo, who is our project manager. He's a housing developer at Northwest Housing Alternatives. So those are our panelists. Thank you all for being here this evening. And I'll just start with an overview kind of to orient us to the project a little bit. This is a aerial look at the area of Tigard. The Tigard, you see the Tigard triangle. You see the existing tax increment finance district, the urban renewal area. You see Fano Creek, the Fano Creek Park outlined there in the green, a strip of green towards the south. The orange star represents the proximity of this proposed project in relation to the rest of the city of Tigard. Next slide, please. And here is a little bit of a site map. If you can orient yourself, you see the Fano Creek trails. You see the Tigard Public Library off to the right there. That would be to the east. So you're orienting yourself just a little bit more. The blue that you see in the middle there is the existing Tigard Senior Center. So this new affordable housing will be co-located on site, literally steps away from the existing Tigard Senior Center and all of the wonderful programming that is offered at the Senior Center. Next slide, please. So the site was selected for many reasons, some of them obvious. And let me just say that the way Northwest Housing Alternatives entered into this process is that we responded to a request for proposals that the city of Tigard issued to the greater housing development community. The city of Tigard selected this site and came up with this wonderful idea that since the city, the Tigard Senior Center is a city-owned property, and the city has a desire to build more affordable housing, what a wonderful idea to co-locate senior housing next to the existing senior center. At Northwest Housing Alternatives, we actually own and operate a very similar property in the city of Wilsonville that we call Creekside Woods, that is similarly co-located next to the Wilsonville Senior Center. So why is this site a good site? Well, it's close to the library, it's walkable to downtown. It's adjacent to the Fano Creek Park and Trail. Again, it's right there next to the senior center so that folks who live at the property can access those programs and those services, including the meals program that is offered on a regular basis. Um, the city has a goal to become very pedestrian oriented. So this will allow folks to live in proximity to many different amenities. And it furthers the commitment to equitable outcomes to help residents redress past inequitable housing policies. So those are several of the points as to why we believe and the city believes that this is a great place to do senior housing. Next slide, please. I believe this is for our other panelist, Sean Farley. Is he here? I can't quite, I don't see
I'm
him
here.
on our screens. Oh, there he is.
I'm under a different name for some
I see.
not
Welcome.
Dustin Prudon, but I'm Sean Farley, the redevelopment project manager. Thanks, Trell. Thanks for everyone who came tonight. Oh, could you go back? Yeah, so why do we need this? It was mentioned in the previous slide, but really we want seniors in Tigard to have an opportunity to age in place. You know, sometimes people own a single family house. When they get a little older, they maybe don't want to do the upkeep, all the landscaping required, and they might need to downsize. And this project like this would enable seniors like that to continue living in Tigard and be in a great location right next to the senior center and Meals on Wheels and the library. So how we came to this site is that we did have a Metro grant 2 or 3 years ago, and we were looking for a site specifically for affordable housing that would be somewhere in the vicinity of the Southwest Corridor light rail project. And this site is about a half a mile from the planned Southwest Corridor project. There'd be a station on Hall Boulevard and Commercial. So, you know, pretty close by. And this site, because it's city owned, would present our ability to donate the land at a lower cost or no cost in this case. So we studied the feasibility with an architect firm and some housing development specialists and found the site to be feasible. And then again, as was mentioned before, we did a competitive RFP process, looked at 3 different nonprofit affordable housing developers who responded, and we chose NHA. We thought they had the strongest proposal. And currently we are just about done with our development agreement and lease with Northwest Housing Alternatives. I'm just dotting the I's and crossing the T's right now. And that'll be approved by council in the next couple of weeks here, or presented to council for the next couple of weeks. And again, as was mentioned before, it achieves the goal. One of the goals is that, you know, we want equitable outcomes. Tigard's not, you know, alone in this, but a lot of suburbs were, you know, designed with basically only allowing mostly single family housing. A lot of other kind of housing wasn't permitted or in very limited locations. A project like this helps redress those past iniquities and allowing people of all different incomes and situations to live in Tigard. So that's all for me. Going to the next slide.
Sean, thank you very much. I think, Josh, I think you are up next for the next couple of slides.
Thank you, Terrell. NHA has made it a priority to ensure ongoing community engagement on this project. About a month after we were selected by the city of Tigard to develop this project, we convened our first community advisory meeting September 2019. We then met each month thereafter with the community advisory group to ensure their involvement in selecting an architect as well as the general contractor for this project. During the first couple of months of 2020, we provided a project update to Tigard City Council and the Tigard Senior Center while also conducting an on-site tour of one of our nearby senior properties in the city of Wilsonville, Creekside Woods Senior Apartments. Since then, we have now hosted 2 online panel events, one back in June, as well as today. We also provided a second update to the Tigard City Council and the Town Center Advisory Commission last month in September. We also met on site with neighbors in July to discuss the project. Looking ahead, we plan to lead many more community engagement discussions in the new year. This includes multiple project design presentations with the Community Advisory Group, additional outreach to communities of color, and a neighborhood meeting during the land use application process. Ultimately, there will be many more opportunities for folks to provide their input on the design of this project. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have great news. In September 2020, Washington County awarded just over $6.2 million of Metro Housing Bond Fund and 23 project-based vouchers for the development of Tigard senior housing. We are very grateful and appreciative of the county's support and look forward to continuing to work with the city of Tigard, as well as community stakeholders to design and develop this project. When complete, we anticipate that most monthly rents will be approximately $980, which is 60% area median income for 34 of our 1-bedroom units. For the 23 1-bedroom units that will receive project-based vouchers, we can ensure that no one will pay more than 30% of their income in rent. Meanwhile, we will continue to search for additional subsidies to bring down the rent. In the near term, the next steps is the schematic design phase, which will kick off this fall, and which will incorporate reviewing the plans and elevation sketches, which will revise and expand them to incorporate additional detail. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is our project timeline that we anticipate for the remainder of this project. As you can see here, the schematic design phase will kick off this month and go through January, which will then be followed up by the design development and construction document phases. We anticipate those will be completed by the fall, early fall. I would like to emphasize that there will be many more opportunities for public input and advisory meetings during the design phase of this project. Looking further ahead, we anticipate that financial closing will occur in fall 2021 and about a 15-month construction period. We plan to have the project leased up by summer 2023. And now I would like to turn it over to Justin Verdun, Director of Real Estate Development for NHA.
So here's the current concept vision for the Tigard Senior Housing building. You'll notice it's about 4 stories, wood frame with all natural materials. It has been shifted to the farthest location of the site away from the single-family residential homes, and it rolls down the hillside to provide views into Fano Creek and the watershed. This allows us to maximize the parking and then orient towards Fano Creek. It'll also allow us for plenty of access to light and air throughout the project. Next slide, please. These are some examples of some of the interior apartment units that we've done in the past. You can see they're very homey with spacious living rooms and kitchens and bedrooms. We're going to have 57 1-bedroom apartments in our current concept scheme, all for seniors age 62 and older that have low incomes. 40% of the apartments, as Josh said, will be project-based, which means that nobody will pay more than 3% of their income in rent, which is a wonderful opportunity for people to age in place. And we're going to do something very special with this project. We're going to make sure that it's all done by universal design and all units will be fully accessible. So again, Tigard residents can age in place without having to feel displaced. Next slide, please. On the ground floor, we'll take advantage of some space directly across from the Tigard Senior Center to make sure that we've got community spaces with meeting areas that are homey and living room-like and allow areas for people to meet. There'll be computer centers with high-speed internet access. There'll be laundry facilities on site. And there'll be additionally an activity space very special to this project up on the top floor, which will look down into the Fano Creek area and again provide that wonderful access to light and air at the top of the building. We will have on-site property manager full-time on the property, as well as a part-time resident services coordinator, both with offices for interactions with the tenants. There. Next slide, please. And here is a very boring site plan of the property, kind of showing the existing entryway with some slight modifications for fire truck access, lots of additional parking spaces in order to accommodate the Tigard Senior Center and a little bit of the housing. A new roadway down to the lower parking area, which crosses across a courtyard between the two entries of the housing building and of the senior center, to allow people to sit out and gather light and air and see each other. One of the important pieces of this project is that we have got safe and covered pickup and drop off areas for the residents, as well as people in the Tigard Senior Center to utilize. We will have a new protected walkway that will go all the way from O'Mara Street down the side of the property and connect into the Fano Creek trail system, so that people will not have to move through the parking lot like they currently do. We will have additional parking from what is currently on the site, and we will also have a parking management plan with parking placards and signs which talk about how long park spaces can be utilized. And we'll take advantage of the fact that the Tigard Senior Center has a very, very high use around the lunchtime, but much, much lower use at other points of the day. You'll notice that the building is entirely outside of the Fano Creek natural area, outside of the wetlands, and outside of a wetland buffer. There will be no construction moving into that area at all. And next slide, please. And I will turn it over to Julia to talk about services.
Thanks, Dustin. Yeah, so I have a little more information about the resident services program that will be offered to residents of this property. If you attended the event in June, you might have heard a little bit about resident services from me already. But for everyone who's new here, our resident services program seeks to link residents to the community and resources and services that they need to remain stable in their housing. The resident services coordinator for the property will be an employee of Northwest Housing Alternatives, so we will continue to be a part of the project long after it has opened. We've been running this resident services program since 2007, so we've got a bit of experience and a bit of learning under our belts. And we currently offer the program to more than 850 older adults statewide, so it is a big program. The main goals are to help residents age in place. We want folks to maintain their health and wellness, and we want people to be able to maintain their housing stability and stay living independently at the property for as long as they want to be there. It's offered to all of the residents of the property. Everyone has equal opportunity to partake, but it's not a mandatory service. So if you know someone who wants to live at the property, but this sounds like something they're not that interested in, that's okay. We're there to serve people when they need us. Some of the specific services that we will be offering to residents of this property include links to transportation resources and other services. We frequently partner with organizations such as Ride Connection and Project Linkage to help people get out and about within their community for those folks that don't drive. We will help residents access primary care and other health insurance questions so that they can maintain the needed level of health insurance as they age in place. We will either host community events ourselves or advertise local community events for people to attend that help with socialization and just give some recreation opportunities. And I do want to emphasize that the residents of the properties are involved in the design of the program. So we do offer resident services to many older adults across many properties statewide, but the program is really tailored to each specific property because each property has its own unique set of needs based on who lives there. So we do an annual resident survey, which collects feedback from residents about which services they find the most helpful and what things they might want to see in the future. And we can design the next year of services based on that feedback from residents. So we're actively engaging with people to make sure that we're offering the right services year over year as the building continues to age as well. And I think now I'm going to turn it back over to Trell just to talk about the next steps here.
Great. Julia, thank you. So Josh provided us a graphic of this, and we could refer to the back to that if we need to, but at the moment we're moving into the next phase in design, which is schematic. We anticipate hosting a advisory committee meeting in the next month in November. This is the advisory committee group that we pulled together at the very beginning of our engagement here. Throughout the schematic design phase, we will have other and additional opportunities to engage stakeholders in design and public input. We'll be aggressively moving to line up and secure our construction financing and our permanent financing. And then all of that comes together in the winter of 2022 so that we can begin construction. It's a pretty long lead time. As you can imagine, affordable housing brings together so many different components, particularly all the various funding components. I've heard it described by some experienced housing developers as the herding of cats. And so once we get all the cats headed in the right direction, we can get on with the construction, and we anticipate that our herding process will be done around the winter of 2022. Once we get into construction, we're well on our way. I think we're getting ready to transition now over into the question and answer sessions that Josh will facilitate. I wanted to ask Sean real quickly though, if you wanted to give recognitions to any of our guests or special guests you might recognize.
Yeah, just a shout out to Councilor Tom Anderson, who's in the meeting, and looks like we have some members of our TCAC. There's not full names there, so I think that's some TCAC members. But thanks to them, and thanks to everyone who's attending tonight.
Thank you, Sean. So Josh, do you want to facilitate our question and answer session here for the remainder of the event?
Thank you, Terrell. And if I can emphasize, as Terrell mentioned earlier, there will be many more opportunities for public input and community involvement in the design of this project. Also, I'd like to point out the City of Tigard's engagement website, which is right here on the slide. And if you have any questions, we have a FAQ on the city's website. And if you want to put forward more questions, we'd be happy to send them to my email right here at carrillo@nwhousing.org, and we'll be sure to not only answer them, but also make them public on the city engagement website. So Q&A. First question we have is for Destin. How tall will the building be? In feet, not stories. I believe the legal limit is 40 or 45 feet due to proximity of the park. I saw some info stating they were trying to get permission for 60 feet. I'm very concerned the building will loom over and be visible from Chelsea Loop, which is a neighborhood with only single family homes.
Yes, and so we did take into account the location of the building in order to get, again, as far away from the single family residences as we could. So shift over to the far side of the site. It is a 4-story building. That's all we know for sure for right now, but typically a 4-story building has got a little bit higher first floor, typically about 9 or 10 feet. And then the other floors are 9 feet. And then you'll have a little bit of roof structure. So it should be safe to assume it will be under 45 feet for the individual stories. You'll notice it does cascade down the hillside. And so where it cascades, it'll briefly be a little bit higher than that in order to allow for that view.
Great, thank you, Destin. Next question is for Julia. Will you be accepting applications for these apartments too?
Sorry, just had to unmute myself. So we will start by taking what we call an interested parties list for this building. And I don't know the exact time frame. It will be somewhere toward the end of construction on the building. So we typically open up an interested parties list. Folks add their names to that list and then are the first to get information when anything new develops with the property. And then at that point, we will have chosen the property management company that will be running the property day to day. today. And that company is going to be accepting the applications and running all of the screening and actually leasing the individual apartments when the building is finally open.
Thank you, Julia. Our next question is for Destin. Why one-bedroom apartments?
One-bedroom apartments are the most in demand for the senior population. You think about it, they're not likely to have, at 62 and older, large families that would require 2-bedroom units. Studios can be slightly cheaper, but they're also very expensive to build. They're almost the same cost as 1-bedroom apartments. And so we chose to go with the most in demand and most needed apartment size.
Excellent, thank you. We have no other questions at the moment, but please feel free to submit your question. Okay, next question is for Destin. Will there be underground parking taking into account the multiple car households for permanent residents needed?
There is no anticipation for underground parking. Underground parking is incredibly expensive to build. We would much rather house seniors than to spend the expense. And we probably would never be funded by the federal or state sources if they knew that they were paying for underground parking.
Thank you. This I may leave for Julia. I've heard that women are most likely in need of this type of housing. Is that true?
You know, I can't speak to the overall need level in that specific area, but I can say that within Northwest Housing Alternatives senior properties, we most commonly have single women living there. You know, of course, there are single men as well, and the occasional couple, but by far the most common group is single females. That is just not by design, of course, just how the population comes together in the senior housing.
Thank you, Julia. Next question for Destin. How many total parking spaces are current and planned?
So currently there are 48 parking spaces on the site. We're hoping to get to 77 parking spaces. There might be a chance for a slight bit more or a slight bit less. It really depends on the landscaping. I think in some of the earlier pictures of site plan, you notice that we're trying to keep a fair amount of landscaping at the entryway. We could remove a lot of that and add some additional parking spaces, but we really like the soft vegetated entry right now. We believe that's a great way to enter the site.
Great, thank you, Destin. Again, please feel free to submit your questions. We're here to answer your questions and any concerns you may have about this project. In regards to the rooftop terrace, that sounds nice, but again, it makes me concerned about the privacy of the residents of Chelsea Loop. Is there a possibility of a privacy barrier in that direction? This would afford privacy for Chelsea Loop residents while still allowing views of the wetlands and park.
I think that is a very good opportunity and a good design suggestion. Certainly the views and the desire for views is out towards Fano Creek and to get the south light into that rooftop area. So there isn't much need or desire to be looking into the residential neighborhood. But it is a fairly far distance from the residential neighborhood. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that overall.
Great, thank you. Next question. I like the new walking connection and sidewalk to Fano Creek Trail. Can you please tell us more?
Yeah, so there's going to be a walkway which is going to be just to the right of the entry off of O'Mara, and it's going to go right down that the east property line, or in an easement all the way from O'Mara all the way down to the Fano Creek Trails. It will vary whether it's in a vegetated landscape area or whether it's adjacent to the parking lots, but it will always be raised and protected by a curb so that families can feel safe.
Thank you. How about telling us more about the depth and width of the building?
Oh my, I'm not sure if I know that off the top of my head. I think we are typically a one-bedroom apartment is about 25 feet deep. We've got them back to back, so that's 50 plus a hallway, which is about another 5 to 8 feet. And then the length, the apartments are typically 22 to 24 feet long. And I think we've got 6 or 8 of them. I couldn't tell you for sure. So there's a lot of articulation on the building, which doesn't necessarily show in this image because it was an earlier image. But as we develop into schematic design, you're going to see that there are pieces of the building that pooch out and that suck back, create spaces, create different views, and so it'll feel it won't feel like a big block of a building. It'll feel like lots of small buildings kind of pushed together, naturally falling down the hillside.
Great. How about lighting? It will be dark at 5 soon. What are the plans for lighting?
I think that's probably my question as well. So lighting is very, very critical and will be part of the building permit and land planning approvals. And we have to provide a certain amount of light on the surfaces so that it's safe for people to transit those distances. Lighting is really gotten a lot better, probably over the last 5 or 6 years, in that the lighting fixtures themselves can be organized so they don't splash light onto adjacent properties and onto adjacent objects. You can really control how they're pointed. So there will be adequate lighting for the seniors and for the public moving down the public transit route.
Excellent, thank you. Next question is for Julia. Would I need to be on the project-based voucher list only to be eligible for 30% monthly rent?
The answer to that is yes. So if you are looking to pay rent that is based on your income, typically about 30%, then yes, you would need to be in one of the apartments that has a project-based voucher. So if you are interested, when you call to add your name to that interested parties list in the future, definitely including the information that you're specifically interested in the project-based voucher apartments will be very helpful. If you're not in one of those apartments, your rent, as you've seen earlier, will still be affordable, but it won't be based on your own personal income. So definitely make sure to note that you're interested in the project-based voucher units if that's what you're looking for.
Excellent, thank you. Will residents be allowed to have cars? Will they rent parking spaces?
They will not rent parking spaces, and while while some will be allowed to have cars, we'll have a parking management plan, which will make sure that not too many of them have cars and too much impact the parking as it's managed. So.
Great, thank you. Next question is for Sean. I like to see more places like this available in Tigard. What is Tigard doing to support this?
Yeah, well, Tigard recently adopted an affordable housing plan, and we've taken a lot of actions to encourage affordable housing, such as exempting affordable housing from systems development charges, from city systems development charges. So that reduces the costs of this kind of housing and enables developers to do more of it. And in places like where we have a TIF district, an urban renewal district, there are some funds available to support that kind of development, specifically in the Tigard Triangle. We recently did a very engaged process with the community, trying to find out what the priorities of people are for the Tigard Triangle. And top 2 projects were affordable housing and parks. And so those are our 2 priorities in the Tigard Triangle this year. And we've set aside funding to support affordable housing in the Triangle. And right now we have one project there that's about to start leasing, another one that's under construction, and a couple more that are in the planning stages.
Thank you, Sean. Are there special construction regulations in regards to the close proximity to Chelsea Loop? For example, construction hour restrictions, weekend construction, construction start times in the morning hours, and dust mitigation from construction in the drier months.
Yeah, so I can take that. The advisory group helped select Walsh Construction Company. They are our contractor. They are an amazing contractor and are very used to working with neighbors on construction activities and coordinating with the construction activities, keeping people informed of next steps and activities that might occur. One example is sometimes when the concrete trucks come in, it's good to know what day that is because they will line up and they will bring in the concrete one after another. They won't block traffic, but they will line up and be ready. There are normal construction hours and construction hour requirements associated with the development of housing office, yes.
Thank you. Next question, will we be able to walk around the building?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is about the economy. The county is giving millions. What happens if the economy goes bad and the money goes away?
This money is Metro housing bonds, and they have already been issued or they've already been promised, so that money will not go away. There are future funds which we will be looking after associated with low income housing tax credits and permanent lending, and we don't typically go for those until pretty late in the process. And the economy does impact those, the value of those. What's been happening to date is that they have been inversely impacted. Low-income housing tax credits are worth less because tax credits are not as much needed by the corporations, but lending, as you know, from mortgage rates has gotten incredibly low, and so we can borrow a lot more. And that's typical. I've been in the business for about 15, 20 years now, and there's always something going on to make it exciting, but it always balances out, works out.
Great, thank you, Justin. Please, folks, don't be shy. We are here to answer any questions or concerns that you have.
Getting back to that question on the distance from the building to Chelsea Loop residential development there, I did a quick measurement on the GIS mapping system, and it looks like it's at least 200 feet from the nearest backyard on Chelsea Loop. So that's an approximate measurement.
That's great. Thank you, Sean. There are currently no open questions. We'll stay tuned for a few more minutes, and if we don't hear any more questions, then I think we will move on to the survey. New question. I have been informed that this project is tax exempt regarding police, fire department, etc. How does this project impact Tigard taxes and or taxpayers?
So yeah, Tigard has had a property tax exemption for protected affordable housing, and it has to prove that it's affordable housing every year. And so that is, it's a trade-off. We are sacrificing some property tax income, but we're doing that to encourage a larger good. And, these kind of projects are typically built by nonprofits and or governmental agencies. And the way to make sure that the rents are low is to reduce the costs of constructing them and their operating costs. So it is a trade-off. We recognize that, but we think it's a good trade-off because these units either wouldn't be built or they'd be more expensive if that property tax exemption wasn't in place. And we think overall the benefits of a wide variety of income, people with a wide variety of incomes are able to live in Tigard.
Great, thank you, Sean. How is the senior center being involved in this process?
That sounds like a question for me, and a great question, because it is something that I meant to mention earlier, so I'm very glad this got brought up. We have been very involved with the Senior Center since the conception of this project idea, and we definitely will be partnering very closely with the Senior Center once the building opens, in addition to in this ongoing process. So that involves both making sure that residents of the property are informed about events and classes and other things going on at the Senior Center, in addition to being looped into the meals program that goes on there. And then in addition to being able to share information about what's going on at the Senior Center back at the property, we want that information to flow in both directions too. So we want the Senior Center to be aware of what's going on at the property. Are there community events where, you know, spaces could potentially be shared? We definitely will be heavily involved. We have a partnership agreement already signed with the Meals on Wheels program. It's very common for us to partner with senior centers that are close to our other senior properties. So that will absolutely be a facet of the services plan for this project.
Right, and you know, the director of the senior center and a couple of members of their advisory committee were on this project's advisory committee. And we have been meeting at the senior center, and we're planning to do a lot more. But of course, the senior center has been closed since the COVID outbreak.
Great, thank you. How about overflow parking? How do we plan to handle overflow parking?
We don't anticipate that there will be overflow parking. And again, there's going to be a parking management plan in order to take the best advantage of the parking that is there and make sure that people are not abusing the use of the parking. There are locations nearby that are city owned, city library, and of course city hall, that do have some overflow locations that we use as overflow locations. I do not believe there's any street parking anywhere in the immediate vicinity, but that would be another option.
Another parking question, Destin. It looks like the overflow parking ramp to the church is going away. Is that correct?
Currently, it is going away. Yep.
Thank you. Where would volunteers park?
The stairs will remain. A pedestrian connection will remain.
That's great news. How about volunteers? Where will volunteers park?
The volunteers of the senior center will park just as they have been parking at the senior center.
Great. The library is currently using the church lot. I'm not sure what the question is, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the library has an agreement with the church for a set number of spaces for their employees. And that'll continue as far as I know.
Thank you, Sean. Will this presentation be available online later? I think I can answer that. Yes, it will be. Next question. In other words, when they begin accepting applications for these apartments, then would I need to indicate on my application that I am interested in the project-based voucher apartment kind?
Yes, so there is a different screening process for the project-based voucher units as opposed to the other apartments in the building. And so when you are working with the property management company, they will know because of that interested party list that you need the application for the project-based voucher apartment. And so that is, yeah, it's critical to mention that, but they will know exactly how to handle that situation because it's two distinct processes.
Great, thank you, Julia. There are no more open questions. We'll wait a couple more minutes, and if we do not hear from folks, then we will transition over to the demographic survey. Will there be visitor parking?
Yes, the Tigard Senior Center has lots of visitor parking for their lunchtime activities and other activities. And now all that parking will be maintained and expanded.
Okay, thank you.
Justin, can you talk a little bit about the idea of a parking management plan for the building and the senior center?
Absolutely. So regularly, there is great advantage to having two different uses like this co-located, in that you can cut down the need for parking because they use the parking spaces at different times of the day. For instance, if a senior 62 and older was to have a job and had a car, they would typically be away from their house during the day working, and then would return at night. Where the Tigard Senior Center is the reverse, that its primary activity is in the middle of the day. So we can control parking in a couple different ways. We can have signs which say 2-hour limits or 4-hour limits for parking usage, which is great for the Tigard Senior Center, for visitors and volunteers and those activities. And it makes sure that the residents do not park in those parking spaces, because the parking time is limited if they're doing it during the daytime for long periods of time. We will have security cameras around the housing as well, so that we can identify if there's anybody that's a serial abuser of parking rules or parking regulations. We can provide placards to the residents that are allowed to park on the parking areas, and make sure that people are notified, know that those cars belong to the residents, and that if they are or are not in areas that they are not. So parking will be managed actively during the life of the buildings, and coordinated between the two different entities, the senior center and the housing.
Great, thank you, Justin. We're still waiting for more questions. We'll hang out for a few more minutes. Will residents have move cars? Will residents have to move cars in bad weather?
I don't believe so. No, there's nothing in the design that has anything in flood zones or within the Fado Creek watershed area.
Yeah, this is not my area of expertise, but I will just say in my 11 years of working with senior properties, I have never seen people have to move their cars during bad weather, so it should be good to go.
Great, thank you, Julia and Justin. One thing I want to highlight is when we leave this meeting, when you all leave this meeting, we will have a demographic survey that will pop up. We hope, if you're willing, that you'll be able to fill that out. It's all anonymous, but it's very helpful data that we'll be able to collect for not only this project, but the work that we do statewide. And so that survey will pop up as soon as you leave the Zoom meeting. Next question. TriMet access will TriMet access be available on O'Mara Street?
Well, I think the bus stop's on O'Mara and Hall Boulevard, the corner, right? But there's also the, Julie, I don't know if you want to talk about the ride lift, that service.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to pop up and say that for folks that have disabilities, we do help people access the TriMet Lift program, both helping with the initial application process, as well as providing, we provide both bus tickets for the general bus, honored citizen tickets, as well as tickets for TriMet Lift. So for folks that just need a little financial assistance using public transportation, the Resident Services Program does have that available.
So the expectation is going to be that not every resident is going to own a car, because, well, many seniors do own cars, many don't, and some might choose to live here so they can save themselves that expense and make use of either the services that'll be available, or quick walk to the TriMet bus, or even a walk up to the light rail station. And then Fado Creek Trail, being right next door, is a very, very popular great way to walk down to Main Street in downtown Tigard.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? We're here for you, so just send them our way.
As people are thinking of their last questions, and as it looks like we might be wrapping up here, I want to thank everyone, our panelists, and then everyone who is attending this. This is really important part of our process to continue the dialogue, continue to stay in touch, and continue to offer the question and answer sessions. So I just wanted to really appreciate everyone's time this evening. Josh, I see we have another question.
Actually, we have two. Would I need to be on the project-based voucher waiting list with Washington County Housing Services only in order to be eligible for it?
Another question for me. The answer to that one is no. So with Washington County, the waiting list there would be for a different type of voucher called a housing choice voucher, which allows you to take that rental subsidy with you wherever you live, as opposed to this type of subsidy with this project-based voucher subsidy lives with the apartment. So whoever lives in that apartment will benefit from that subsidy. So you don't need to be on any sort of waiting list with Washington County. There is, the income screening and verification process to move into that apartment, and that does involve Washington County. I won't go into the details of that because you don't want me to. It's quite complicated, and I'm not the best person to give those details right now. But you do not have to be on any sort of waiting list with Washington County to move into a project-based voucher apartment.
Julia, if I understand it right, the property keeps a applicant wait list for the project-based units at the property.
Correct, exactly. So all you need to do is be on that interested parties list and or apply for one of the project-based apartments through the apartment building itself, and that's it.
Great, thank you, Julia. Next question, how do you decide who can have cars and who cannot?
So typically, if there's a limitation on the number of people that can have cars, it's a first come, first serve. And when you run out of the parking placards or the parking available spaces, then nobody else can get one moving into the housing.
Great, thank you, Destin. Any more questions, please send them our way.
Josh, just because we end this session doesn't mean Q&A session is over, right? You've provided the link here to the Engage Tigard page for this project, and I believe
Yes,
there's
absolutely.
an opportunity. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. There will be many more opportunities for questions. Any time, any day, feel free to email me. My email is right here on the slide, Carrillo@nwhousing.org, and we'll be happy to answer your question. We'll also be sure to put that Q&A on the city's engagements FAQ website. Next, we have a question here. Will they allow small pets like a cat or a dog?
You know, that's a good question. I have to admit, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if that's actually been decided yet, whether or not they will allow pets. Some properties do and some do not. And so I just don't want to give a premature answer here. So I'm going to have to say, I'm not sure yet.
Thank you. Robert, the question about the cats and dogs, we'll be sure to follow up with you and include that answer on the FAQ website. Is there any possibility the site layout will change? I thought the original proposal directly north of the senior center was awkward and forced. This layout seems much better.
There's always a little possibility as we get deeper into the design, but I think it's highly unlikely. This is one of the things we've really focused on, was trying to make sure that we accommodated all the requests of the neighbors and thoughts about the design and thoughts about the location going forward. And this does seem to be pretty clearly the best opportunity.
Thank you, Destin. We have no more questions, but we will stick around for a couple more minutes. Terrell, as we await for more questions, is there anything more you wanted to add as we wrap things up?
Well, a couple things. I want to say thank you to Sean and thank you to the city of Tigard. You've been very, very thoughtful in initiating this project and this process. You've been a great partner to work with. And so to the staff and city council there at Tigard, it's been a pleasure. And we feel very grateful for this opportunity. And we're committed to following through and making sure that this project is something that you all are proud of for years to come. So I wanted to say that we don't get very many opportunities to partner with cities like this in this way that you are partnering. So we're grateful for that and appreciate it. Also, the members from the community who have raised their hand to be on our advisory group, people who attend the senior center, leadership at the senior center, members of the Urban Renewal District, and neighbors. We really appreciate you dedicating your time. That's volunteer time. You've stepped forward to add to this project, give us your best input, again, to make the project the right and the best project that it can be. So I wanted to say thank you to those folks who are volunteering their time to help us shape this project as well.
Yeah, and we at the city are happy with our partnership with NHA, and we're looking forward to a great project.
Any last questions before we sign off?
Hey, Josh, let me say thank you to each of you panelists for this. Well done. Thank you to everybody who tuned in this evening. And, I think it's been a good event given, we can't be face to face. We have to do it this way to keep the social distancing and to keep one another healthy. I will sign off, even if you want to stay on here, Josh, for a little bit longer and say, just want to wish everybody health and safety and to keep our neighbors and our families in mind. This is a time when we all have to really be aware of how one another is doing, how our neighbors are doing. We really need to stay connected and help one another. It's at the heart of our mission. It's at the heart of the housing that we offer in the community. And so, it's always that reminder, everybody's having to work really hard to stay connected, but it's also very important. So thank you all.
Thank you, Terrell. All right, thank you, everyone. We are going to end this meeting. But again, if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me at carrillo@nwhousing.org. Thank you.